Yes, indeed, folks, it's in the blue, please, right here on CynicalBrits.com with myself, Total Biscuit. Yes. Unnecessarily inflections, I see, right. Unnecessary syllables right there. Why? Because we goddamn can. Oh, yes. Because we can. Okay. Let's talk about video games. That's what we're here for, so I am told. There's a subject that people have been wanting me to tackle for quite some time. At least as soon as it came out, immediately it came in there. So, whatever the case, I think we can certainly get started on that one. We shall talk about it, see what's going on, what the hizzle is. I don't know what that means. My skin is whiter than white. It's whiter than your average Milky Bar kid. And your average Milky Bar, in fact. Therein lies the problem, regardless of the fact that I got a little bit of a nerd tan while in Italy. Still whiter than white. I have this piece of cartridge paper right here, and it looks practically ghetto in comparison. Whatever the case, the subject, ladies and gentlemen, is Call to Arms. ALMS, in my honest opinion. What is the purpose of Call to Arms, you might ask? To get people to actually use the Dungeon Finder. So, I shall describe the system to you, and then we will talk about what's good about it and what's not so good about it. Because this is the kind of thing that I believe people expect a one-sided rant over, and actually, you're not necessarily going to get that, because there's always a method behind Blizzard's madness. It depends on what that madness and that method might actually be. Yeah? What is their aim? Because, like, say, there's things that they do to make the game easier for, I wouldn't say casuals, because, as I said before, casual has no indication of skill. I'm talking about entitled bads, entitled casual players that are just horrible at the game. There's always a reason behind what they do. I just don't necessarily like the reason. In fact, I very often despise the goddamn reason. And I think it's bad for the game. So, there you go. We'll see as to whether or not this is. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk about Call to Arms. What is Call to Arms? He asks as inexplicably. Your freaking post has disappeared. Oh, where's my bloody links? That's what I get for randomly closing windows on my computer. Professional. Where the hell is it? There we go. So, this is what Call to Arms is actually going to be. Whenever there is a limited amount of a class roll within the queue, i.e. tanks, yeah? Let's just be honest here. When we say, the system will automatically detect which class roll is currently the least represented in the queue. What you really mean to say is that after a certain time, Call to Arms will realise there aren't enough tanks in the queue, and will then offer them additional rewards for entering the Dungeon Finder queue and completing a random level 85 heroic dungeon. So in other words, they are using the carrot. They are dangling rewards in front of people's faces to make them go back into dungeons and go and tank for them and so forth. Now, anytime the Dungeon Finder queue is longer than a few minutes, the Call to Arms system will activate, and Call to Arms for tanks... Yeah, here we go. It's funny, it's like, in the case of tanking being the least represented role, let's just rename that. Because tanking is always the least represented role, the Call to Arms tanks icon will always display in the Dungeon Finder UI menu, every time, regardless. You just logged in again after server maintenance, nobody's on the server, still a shortage of tanks, always a shortage of tanks. There's only one guy on the server, he's a tank. Tank shortage! I can guarantee it. Man. I'll tell you what, we seem to have less tanks than the bloody Libyan rebel army. I don't know why, but there you go. Ah, Christ. Now, you are offered certain rewards for doing this. You're eligible for additional rewards. You must solo queue for the random level 85 heroic in order for that to actually happen, and complete the dungeon by killing the final boss. Every time you hit the requirements, there is no daily limit to this, you'll receive a goodie bag, which contains gold, chance at a rare gem, chance at flask of potion, a good chance of getting a non-combat pet, including cross-faction pets, and a very rare chance, which is equal to the chance that you would get it otherwise if you were to go into the dungeon and pick up the drop of a rare drop mount, including the Reins of the Raven Lord, Swift White Hawk Strider, and Death Charger's Reins, etc., etc. So, all of those rare mounts that never ever bloody drop, you now have chances of getting them without actually going into a terrible dungeon that you have got sick of 5 years ago. Is that necessarily a bad thing? No. Would I prefer that they just recolored the damn thing so that at least the people that got the Death Charger's mount, the Hawk Strider, and the Reins of the Raven Lord felt like they'd actually done something the proper way? Yes. Should Blizzard take a note out of the book, or indeed just half the pages out of the book, of Valve, when they called the weapons that were acquired in the legitimate way before the Manconomy electronic store came into the game, vintage? Yes, they should. Even just giving them an additional suffix or prefix, or just recoloring them slightly, would make them sufficiently unique. This is the only time in the game that I'm okay with recolors and reskins, just because I like for people to have things that are sufficiently unique, and I like people to find value in it. I think that people finding value in their characters and the achievements of their character, and not feeling like they've suddenly had all of their work completely ruined by the fact that somebody's just got that mount in a way easier manner and didn't put anywhere near as much work into it, I find that very valuable, because I think that's what keeps people playing. I do. I really, really do. That's why I think there should be a lot more unique stuff that's hard to get. I'm okay with these people having something that I don't. That's fine. I see no need. I have no desire to get a hold of these items. But it's cool that other people do want to do that. So, yes. Now, the system is meant to address the unacceptable queue times. Usually, simple lack of representation of tanks. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We don't feel that tanky or healing roles have any inherent issues that are causing the representation disparity. Then you're bloody deluded, aren't you? Oh, please. What else is it? Sorcery? The weather? Magical interference over the internet? You know, tanks are getting lost. The packets are just disappearing on the way to your data center. That's why there's no tanks. There's actually, like, thousands of tanks queuing up. There's loads of tanks. But most of the tanks' packets actually disappear, so it appears they're not actually there. That's why, obviously. That's the reason. There is a reason why people aren't playing tanks and healers. There are a wide variety of reasons, in fact, so let's start addressing them, shall we? One of the first reasons that people are not playing tanks and healers in the random dungeon queue is that other people are stupid. Simple as that. Because Blizzard, for the last few years, has encouraged an environment where it's okay to fail miserably and you'll still get a pat on the head and a bloody cookie anyway. So, people that tank and people that heal are sick of being blamed for the failings of DPS that can't pull 2k bloody DPS, and, yeah, pulling 2k DPS in Cataclysm is hilarious. But you see people being so bad, I walk in fire, herp, dip, dip. I blame tank and healer for all of my own failings. I pull aggro, herp, dip, dip. You know, they are sick of that. Yeah? They are sick of idiots. They're sick of bad healers. The tanks are sick of bad healers and DPS. The healers are sick of bad tanks and DPS. And the DPS just whine about everybody, including the DPS. So, what are you going to do in a situation like that? So, most of the tanks are, in fact, acting as part of a guild. Why? Because that's the best way to do things. Because you can rely on your guildies. Because there's actually a bit of quality control going on in terms of who's been recruited into your guild. And if there isn't, well, you're doing it wrong. So, yes, there are inherent problems in tanking or healing, and they are related to the actual system itself. If you think that bribing people into going back into the dungeons is going to work for you, I think you're actually sadly mistaken. If people are not going into dungeons, that's because they aren't any fun. Seriously. There is only so much you can force people to do. And I think people are rapidly realizing this over the course, and they have been doing so over the past few years, but it's got particularly obvious within Cataclysm because you've seen some very, very high-quality questing content to the point where it's pretty much as good as, say, a single-player RPG. And it's obvious that Blizzard is more than capable of inventing stuff like that. And then they come out with dungeon content that, while good, doesn't actually innovate in any real way. And you've got an expansion that doesn't really innovate in any real way. So you've then got other games coming out that people are more interested in, and I think they're rapidly realizing that, hey, actually, I don't really care about this anymore, and I'm okay with not doing the dailies. I'm okay with not doing the daily grind. I'm alright with that. I can live with myself. I don't feel the need to do this anymore. Because, let's be honest, this is not fun anyway. That's one of the main problems. If your dungeons are not fun to the point where people aren't going into them, the problem is with your bloody dungeons. You can't just dangle a non-combat pet in front of people and expect everybody to suddenly come rushing back and enjoy the damn thing. It's not enjoyment anyway. It's means to an end. And there's always going to be a certain amount of that within an MMO. Because that's just how content is, yeah? Content is repetitious. However, think about it this way. The dungeons have become a walkover once again, thanks to yet more nerfs. In fact, let's just have a look at it right now. I'm just going to show you this, because this I found to be absolutely goddamn disgraceful. There have been yet more patch notes that actually came out in the PTR. Massive numbers of changes to dungeons. This was a few days ago now, if I recall correctly. I'm just scrolling down to actually find it. And the main point of these changes was that pretty much everything got nerfed again. It's true, they did. Let's find it, shall we? Where, oh where, oh where? Oh yes, of course, I was going to say, that's the April Fools. What the hell? What am I thinking? It was like about a week ago now, I think most of these changes were actually announced. If I can find the Sonics. There we go, absolutely. Yes, the 4.1 PTR patch notes for March 30th. A huge amount of 5-man dungeon changes, and I believe every single one of these is actually a nerf. In every way. Let's just pick some at random, shall we? Bound Flames in Karsh Steel Bender encounter no longer create lava pools when they're killed. Yeah, easier. The range of short throw ability by Twilight Sadius has been reduced by 10 yards. Rage Zone, cast by Defias Blood Wizards, now only increases damage dealt and no longer increases damage taken. Are you serious? That's adorable. Oh my. We can't have a trade-off, folks. That's terrible. Compromise? Not on my watch. Bleeding wound damage from General Umbrus has been lowered by 20%. Malignant Trog now moves more slowly. And combat damage bonus from Forge Master Throngus has been reduced by 50%. The Twilight Flame patch from the Twilight Drake has been removed. Seismic Shard now has a more obvious visual warning. Why does it need a more obvious visual warning? It's a giant goddamn rock! How could it be more goddamn obvious? It's a bloody rock! It's huge! It's bigger than you are! Gill Goblin Hunter's Poisoned Spear direct and periodic damage has been reduced. Tsunami damage, reduced. Blight Beast, summoned during the Ozomat encounter, now deal less damage with Aura of Dread. Blah, blah, blah. A massive, huge list. And oh yeah, they also cut the frickin' Wailing Cannons in half, because the maze section's confusing. Oh. Maybe this is the reason people don't care anymore. Maybe this is the problem. Because you're creating an environment where people are just face-rolling content. They're falling asleep in the middle of it. No wonder they don't want to go back in there. It's a goddamn joke. They view it as a horrible minimum wage job. This is why, like, daily quests aren't hard, yeah? The vast majority of them are not remotely difficult in any way. So people view them as a minimum wage job. It's a means to an end. Whereas if I go into a dungeon and it's challenging, and I'm like, oh, cool, this is a challenge, I've got to be on the ball, I've got to be focused, I might not even enjoy it, but at least I'm awake! That's a start, isn't it? And then we come back to the fact that this is, once again, spitting in the face of everything Blizzard claimed within Cataclysm, which was, we want to encourage guild play again. So what we're going to do? Well, we're going to put in a system whereby you have to queue solo and go and play with people outside of your guild, even though you don't want to. Why? Because you get crap tons of rewards now if you do. Now, I'm hoping that guild challenges will actually compensate for this, yeah? And they will make you continue to do things in your guild, but I am sorry. Trying to draw people away from their guilds is just ridiculous. If you want a proper balanced system whereby you have tanks and you have DPS and you're able to cure quite quickly, get in a guild. And I've read a couple of blogs that said, oh, Total Biscuit's throwing out his arse. My guild doesn't work that way. Your guild sucks. Therein lies the problem. Get a better guild. If your guild doesn't work that way, your guild is not functioning properly. It is a failure, as are you for staying in it. Deal with it. Get it fixed. If you can't find groups within your guild is terrible. Organize. Get it sorted out. Recruit new members. Do something instead of whining that, oh, guilds aren't the answer to everything. Yes, they are if they're done properly. I'm sorry, but just pressing the join button does not automatically mean that all your problems will suddenly vanish. You have to actually take part and be proactive in order to make it work. And that is the one thing that guilds can do. They can be proactive, they can organise, and they can make it work. Whereas pugs will never, ever manage that. That's why pugs will always be inferior. Every single time. And it's regardless of what stuff you give to people, that's not going to change. And trying to pull people away from guild runs in order to get them into randoms is the most irresponsible goddamn thing I've ever heard in my life. Seriously. My, oh my, oh my. My name is Total Biscuit, and you're listening to the one and only Blue Please right here on CynicalBrit.com. I'll be right back after this, folks. This is Master Plan. It's called Soulburn. Enjoy.